So we are now going to have a panel discussion, okay? And I will, once the chair is set up, I will introduce the panelists. And we'll be taking on an interesting topic which should be applicable to almost everyone in the crowd. Whether you are fresh out of college, whether you're in college, whether you've been out of college working professionally for a few years or a lot of years, or you're running your own company, or you intend to run your own company. So let me introduce the panelists first. And panelists, as I call out your name, I'd like you all to come on top. One sec. Let's get this done right. Here. So so we are getting a mix of people from different companies here. So first, Sidhu, come on stage. Sidhu is heading Gojek. And the reason we wanted him on stage is because he's representing a large product company and how your careers can be shaped in a large product company. Next up, we will have Sachin Chintre, who's... hey, did we clap for him? What are we doing, people? What are we doing? Next up is Sachin Chintre. He is the director at Josh Software, a large services company. All right, next up we have Avdi Grim. You've already heard him before in the morning. And Avdi comes with a large amount of almost 20 years of experience as an individual, built a product called Ruby Tapas, is doing some individual consulting and working on different tools today. Lastly, we have an interesting individual most of you have not met, Keith, right? Now, Keith was, we were contemplating and Keith asked me like, hey, you know, what am I going to contribute here? Now, Keith comes with a unique talent. And Keith says very proudly, I'm happily unemployed. Now, whereas the initial laugh that you'll get or the grin that you have is, dude, he's unemployed, but he is happy. He's got over 35 years of experience. And Keith is used to be in the US, is now settled very comfortably in Thailand, works at his pace, when he wants, how he wants, with whom he wants, and considers himself happily unemployed. Do you want to be there? All right, welcome panelists. I've done a brief round of introductions while you come in. It would definitely help if you could add a few sentences of your own about, about yourselves. Why don't we start in the order we started? There you go, Avdi. And maybe you'll keep the focus towards what are your thoughts about, careers for people who are fresh out of college, still, like the spectrum that is on the panel here.
Well, I'm Avdi, and I'm not sure. My career has been a little peculiar, so I'm not sure how applicable some of my lessons have been to everyone. I up to a certain point, I pursued a fairly traditional software career arc. Well, I didn't go to college for this, but I did. I started out at a really big corporation, and then I went to a smaller rail shop, and then I went to a startup, and then I went to consulting. And then from there, I kind of went off into like educating other programmers, which is maybe a little bit less, not where everybody goes.
The whole 9 yards. All right, Sachin.
All right, so I started off my career, I did my graduation in computer science. I did my post-graduation in computer science. So it was like all about computers. I started off a job, as a trainee engineer in a UK-based company. And there, I was doing very interesting work. I was actually programming, the payment terminals for British Airways and London Transport. So it was pretty interesting because, what you write, it is actually getting used in the market. So that really excited me. And after that, I ventured into my own, consulting. Then I again went back to service. And, finally, I've, after taking a taste of consulting plus working in a company, I'm back to, working with Josh, where, I'm really enjoying work because I get to do both here at Josh. So it is like, that is how it has been progressing.
Sidhu?
I got into this line just by chance because my school had a computer lab when I was really small. I don't know how that happened. It's not normal for a Bangalore school in the late 80s. But I got exposed to it through that, and I started programming when I was 6 or 7 casually. And I continued to do that for a really long time, right through school, college, etc. Before starting work, my first company was ThoughtWorks, 12 years, 13 years ago this year. And from then onwards, I've written code at several different scales. Also started up several times. I've done 3 product companies, I've done 2 services companies. And then the last company got acquired by Gojek 2-3 years ago, which is how I wound up at Gojek, where I work on the data engineering team, the recruiting team, and the coaching teams. Over the years, I've also ended up teaching a lot of boot camps for a lot of people who are just starting out on their careers, both for my own firms or for clients or and so I've got to see a lot of people start their careers and observe them over a period of time, and it's been interesting, and yeah, that's one of the reasons why when we were talking about this panel, I was very interested. But yeah, that's it about me.
Nice. Keith?
I also am not formally educated in software development, but I started software development in the time when the PCs were being introduced a long time ago. And I was studying accounting at college and was doing accounting work at work, and we got a computer, and I found out that in addition to using it with the package that it came with, you could write your own programs in it. So I'd stay late at night studying the manuals and writing all these tools that eventually our department started using. And over time, as I was going to school part-time at night, it took a long time. Well before I graduated, I realized, you know what, I like this way more than accounting. And so that's what I decided to do with my career.
Nice, and I just realized that since the start of the day, y'all have been seeing too much of me, but I never really got down to introducing myself till at lunchtime somebody says, hey, what's your name again? And I was like, damn, I should do that. So I'm Gautam Rege. I'm the director at Jor Software. I've been programming since for the last 18 years now. I've been programming a lot in Ruby, a lot in Go right now. Sidhu and me, we started organizing RubyConf India since that year, 2010. And it's been a nice, very interesting journey. We're very passionate about open source and playing regularly. All right. So, panelists, I'd like to get started with the definition when we are trying to talk about a different broad spectrum of people here. I know we have people in college, just out of college, a few years of working, and maybe many years of working. So when you have to define, or when we are having this discussion, what would you define as a junior developer versus a senior developer so that we can set the stage? Maybe Sidhu?
Yeah, sure. Happy to go. So, I mean, this is a question that you end up wrestling with a fair bit at any point in time once you have more than a few people you're working with, right? Like who's junior, who's senior. The best answer I've been able to come up with is much of the work of building software is to solve a problem. And when you try to solve a problem, there are 1,000 ways in which you could solve that problem, right? Being able to recognize what those options are, being able to look at a problem and then look at technology and say, this is in the realm of the possible. These are the options. To solve this problem, we can do A or B or C or D. And that this is what each of these approaches will take, and this is what each of these approaches will cost, and then probably be right about it, is what makes a person a senior. When you're probably wrong about it, you're still junior. So it's your ability to look at a problem and say, this is what is possible, and probably be right, is the way I would put it.
So it's not about years.
It's not. Oh, not at all. It has. I mean, there's a broad correlation, obviously, because I think experience does contribute a great deal. But at least with software, it seems to be nonlinear. I've seen some really young people move really far down this road, and it's often correlated just with humility. I mean, the older you get, the more you realize how incompetent you are, and so you just become more open to learning. But otherwise, a lot of really young people I've seen who've realized this sooner have scaled up really, really fast.
Yeah, well, it's in line with what Avdi's your closing slide was, where you said that as a beginner, you love to code, you should code a lot because it makes you feel good, you're a superhero then. But as you grow older, the lesser you code, the better you are.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true, and I definitely agree that you know, the older you get, the less you know. That's certainly been true for me. For me, I think the defining factor of a senior developer has to do more with their social intelligence and their emotional intelligence. For me, it's when you cross that line from being able to get very good work done on your own to causing the people around you to do better work, or helping them to do better work, whether that's with how you help lead them or how you mentor them or how you assist them. You know, once I see somebody who is clearly making everybody around them better, that's when I think that's a senior engineer.
Interesting. And the audience, please, if you all have a question, an opinion, or suggestion, please raise your hands. We have a mic. Right will run around, and you can definitely please participate in this conversation. So, Sachin, this is typically a large, like it's in India, and there is a large spectrum of people who are in the services industry, right, who are providing consulting services. At that time, as part of your career growth, what would you recommend which should people look forward to growing up and become the traditional? How many of you all have the feeling that in 5 years I have to be a manager, in 7 years I have to be a manager? I can see people smiling, oh my God. Or you say, no, I want to stick to being a techie. Which role, and what is your opinion on that?
I think there are two important factors to this. One is like in any field, you know, whether it is services or a product, the most important factor is you should see what you like and you should stick to it. So, you know, if I look at my career, you know, for 20 years, if I look back, I will be, you know, proud of every single thing that I've done, whether it is small or big, and I can talk about each single thing, you know, for hours together. So, you know, that is what I think is very important in your career. That you should like what you're doing. The second most important thing is, you know, and you know, it ties back to the first one, that if you're trying to do something, you know, if you're working on a services company, it is apparent that, you know, you need to understand what is the requirement, what the client needs. It is not like, you know, just you're coding and you're just, you know, giving some piece of code. It is, you know, you have to get into the shoes of the client, the shoes of the product. You need to understand what the intent of the product is. Most of the time, I can tell you that the requirement that comes is not what is required. You know, so it is your responsibility, you know, to get into you know, that mode to see, you know, what really is expected out of this product. And then start working towards that, asking those questions, pushing back the customer or other people who are, you know, resisting, and getting to the best of the product out, what you know, you should look at.
So be a techie and behave with a role.
Yeah.
Floor open to others too. How would you define a career path for trying to get into a managerial role? And management could be technical management, product management, or people management, whatever.
I mean, I tend to have somewhat a controversial opinion on this matter, and you know, we were just talking about this earlier today in the context of this conversation. I mean, I would even argue that there's no difference. It's the same thing. I mean, if you, it's almost naive to try to draw a boundary there and say this is management and this is programming, in any situation where more than a single person's involved in solving a problem. Now, whether you know, most usually people conflate management with bureaucracy, or management with being rigid, or management with, and it's, yeah, I mean, Sid's got a whole talk on this, and but yeah, I mean, it's a controversial opinion. I don't think there's a difference. Yeah, I mean, that's my perspective. There's no difference. If you're good at one, you're good at the other.
You're just saving it for his talk. All right, here let's change the topic for Sid. Okay. There are a lot of, I mean, I know we're at a Ruby conference, so obviously if we ask, hey, what's your first language, it's going to be Ruby. But times change, times evolve, and Keith, you've seen times change. So how often do you decide to, you know what, I need to hop on to the next big thing, learn the next new thing, and keep abreast with newer technologies, languages, and stuff?
Well, if I were qualified to answer that question, I wouldn't be unemployed.
There you go. There you go.
I mean, it's a judgment call, and a lot of it is, what I've learned is, you got to be interested in what you're doing, otherwise you're just not going to make as much progress. You know, you've got to have that passion, and when you do, then things stick, and you want to spend more time doing it and learn it well.
So a very pinpoint. Go ahead. Go ahead. You had to add something to that.
I will just say that, you know, I mentioned in my talk that I started out, you know, very early in my career. I read the book The Pragmatic Programmer, and one of the pieces of advice that they have is to learn a new language every year. And I think that's very good advice. And I did try to follow it for a long time. I can't say I followed it religiously, but I did spend a lot of the early years of my career learning new languages, you know, learning things like Haskell to get a really different perspective. And I think that learning new languages, especially if you learn ones that really will give you a different perspective, you know, if you've only worked with imperative languages, then or with procedural languages, then, you know, make sure you have that functional experience and that object-oriented experience and things like that. Find the things that will really push you to think in new directions, and you'll bring that back into any language that you're working in. But I will say that over the years, I've started to define that practice of learning a new language every year more and more broadly. And for instance, you know, a couple of years ago, I kind of decided that the language I was going to learn this year was marketing. You know, don't limit yourself. You can learn anything, and there are so many different languages, so to speak, different areas of expertise that will help you as a developer.
Actually, I started programming with Pascal. I did COBOL. I have done like DBase, you know, FoxPro. Maybe you've not even heard those names. And but I would say one thing that, you know, whenever you're programming something, the fundamentals don't change. All right. So it is always the same fundamental that the code that you write has to be bug-free. And essentially, to get to that point, you have to think through and write, you know, your code, ensuring that you're, you know, catering to all these cases that are being handled. So that is, I think, I would put it that way. Now, the question that Gautam asked, when you have to change, basically every language, I think it has got its own, you know, path, and eventually it fades out. So there was a time when nobody was talking about anything other than C. Then a time came when it was C++, then it was Java, and, you know, so on and so forth. So you have to realize, you know, whether the new language that is coming up, you should keep yourself abreast about the new things that are happening. You should read about it and see if that is interesting you. If it is, you should start learning that. That is how I would put it.
I'd like to echo on what Abdi said. For me, my new language that I'm studying this year is Thai, because I'm living in Thailand, and my life would be so much more interesting if I know what's going on around me.
I mean, just to sort of add to what's already been said in terms of, you know, think about it more broadly, that learning a new language every year is great advice, but you can think about it more broadly. I would go sort of add on to that by saying that I think most people think of a career bottom first, and since we're talking about what career you know, progress means, like the thing that I would sort of challenge is, how do you perceive the concept of a career even? Do you really need one in the traditional sense of it? Because in this day and age, if you can code, you're actually very privileged. You know, you've got the most one of the highest, lowest cost, highest leverage tools known to humanity ever in history available to you. And it's just really a question of what options that this opens to you that you want to explore. And, you know, in the vein of saying things that you enjoy, you should do. What is it that this opens you to, that you enjoy, and you just pursue that year after year after year? And as long as you're doing that, I think, you know, I would call that progress.
I would call that a career. Like, you keep enjoying what you're doing, and you know, it's just your life is moving on, and you enjoy it. All right, I'm going to leave the floor open for a few questions, if you'll have any, or I have a few on my list. Questions? Feel free to embarrass anyone on the panel. Yes, please.
I get worried, you know, like you ask for questions, no one says, you feel free to embarrass anyone on the panel. Like three hands
hands
go up at the back.
Hi, I'm Aditya. Audible, right? Yeah. So I've done this just once, and like that's decided I'm not going to program till I really, or I'm not going to work till I really feel like I really want to work again, and that lasted for about a month, but it really helped a lot, like refreshed me completely. So any similar experiences you have had, and what would you advise on that front?
Well, I've spent a lot of time not working at a conventional job recently, and it's done wonders for my physical and mental health. I was so stressed out at my last job, which was great in so many ways, but there were things going on in my life that were really stressful. In 2015, my daughter, my only child, got married, which was a great thing, but both of my parents died that year. And helping them through their last years was quite difficult and stressful. And so by the time that was over, I told my employer, I need a few months. And they said, we can only give you one. And so that's when I said, okay, I gotta go. Hopefully you won't need to spend a long time. But I agree totally. It can be very refreshing. And it kind of brings me to another thing too. We're talking a lot about career, but I think it's really important also to remember that first and foremost, we're human beings. And hopefully we consider part of our mission in life to improve the situation around us, improve the world, and be a positive influence on others. So please don't leave your humanity at the door. I've been in environments where that happened, and it was not happy.
Yeah, actually, you know, I got to a situation where I was too stressed out in my work, and it was such a condition that, you know, it was barely I was able to work. So that time I just took a 6 months break, and it really didn't matter much in my career, but it only helped me to, you know, regenerate myself and get back to, you know, the stream and think about what exactly I'm trying to do and what I want to do.
I have, I think, two things to say about restoring your enthusiasm for your work. The first is, you know, if you're feeling run down and beaten down and just not interested in what you do, find an opportunity to teach other people about what you do. And that can come in a lot of forms, but you know, whether it's helping with some kind of local free workshop for people that are new to code, kids or somebody else, or whether it's mentoring people or whatever it is, it's amazing how that process of teaching somebody else can really restore your own enthusiasm for what you do. The other thing that I'll say is, I think there's a stereotype of programmers, of like the really cool programmer who's like young and like never sleeps and is just hyper caffeinated all the time and codes all night because they love it. And I think that's a terrible stereotype. I think
that's the productive way to run a business, right? For some reason, your engineers working all night every night is a good idea.
Because obviously more is better, as we know. You know, I think it's such a damaging stereotype. I think, you know, you do have an opportunity every day to take a vacation, and that's called sleeping. And if there's one thing I can tell you for maintaining your sanity, it's just don't get the job done today and sleep instead. You know, I don't get to do this because I have 4 kids, but you need to do it for me, okay?
I mean, I'd like to address specifically something that I've noticed in India over the years in this context is that somehow we're really scared of taking breaks. There is this deep underlying, almost inherited generational fear that my job will get lost. Some unspecified bad thing is going to happen, but nobody can quite explain what it is. Because whoever the people I'm talking to are who want to take a break but are really stressing over it are usually good programmers. And you know what's really rare? A good programmer. So every good programmer knows if they raise their hands, there are 10 companies that will jump on them to offer a job. But yet, you will find, you know, this fear that if I do something like this, it's not normal. In our culture, this is not normal. It will reflect badly on me. What will people think? Will I lose my job? And this often may not even be a conscious articulation, but just this subconscious fear that prevents you from saying, hey, you know what, I think I need some time off. The financial impact is not serious. So I'm going to take a couple of months off and rejuve and come back. And somehow that's just something that so few are comfortable doing in our culture for some reason. So, yeah.
Another thing is that if you do take some time off in that, like that, there are some very interesting things you can do with your time. For example, in rural Thailand, there's a program where you can teach English to students. And they'll just put you up in a house if you want, with a family. And so you can, don't limit your imagination, just do something radically different. And especially if it involves working with other people and teaching other people, you'll get that human connection that I often didn't get in my work because I was in front of a machine all the time. So be creative with your time off as well.
I have also realized that every time when you're working on something and it feels very mundane, just transfer it to somebody else, teach somebody else, as Avdi said, to make yourself redundant so that you can do the things you like to do. And it's also, in other words, in managerial terms, it's called delegation, which really helps a lot if it's especially the kind of work what you might find very mundane is actually very interesting to somebody else for some time. So pass it on.
This is something that comes up constantly in the context of people who want to start speaking at conferences, for example, or writing, even blogging. They'll say that, hey, I know this, I worked on this, but there's nothing big here, no? Everyone already knows this stuff, so what's the point? It's very easy to forget that you didn't know this stuff at some point, and there are a lot of people out there who didn't know that stuff. And after you know it, it may seem simple. It's easy to forget how hard it was before, right? And that's true for anything you've learned. So there's a lot of this stuff which you can, you'll pick up. It becomes easy for you. You're like, I can do this in my sleep. But it's still immensely interesting and challenging for someone who hasn't gone through that process yet.
And the timing of your statement, Sidhu, couldn't be better because right after the break, we are going to have lightning talks. And you will see people. We started this concept of lightning talks only because there was a fear of speaking on stage and being under the limelight, literally a lot of light here. And now, as these flash talks we'll see after the break, we're encouraging people to come on stage and speak about any small thing, big thing that you did and felt proud about. Those few minutes of being in the limelight can be the difference of your career, your confidence levels, your complete outlook to life. That I did something, and it totally helps. We have like about 20 seconds to go. So very briefly, for everyone, what would you rather do? Learn a new language next year? Take a break? Or, make the next big product or service? I love to have embarrassing questions asked all the time.
All at once?
Already doing that, huh?
No, all at once.
All of them. All right. Okay.
Probably do some service or product, which is very interesting.
I'm just happy you said didn't take a break.
Not really.
If I could do anything,
Yeah?
learn to play the piano.
Ooh, nice.
I find that even though I have that's great. Even though I do have a lot of spare time, I enjoy investing it in programming and in learning new things. So they're all good.
Awesome. All right, it's been a great. I've enjoyed the panel discussion myself. The applause will tell us whether y'all did. Very good. Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.